Hi guys, welcome back. Nick Thomas here at the Academy of Historical Fencing. I'm bringing you another lesson on military or British military swordsmanship on foot. And we're going to now be looking at the grip of the sword, as in how we actually hold and grip the sword, the different methods of gripping it, and also how it can change in certain actions. So instinctively, if you give somebody a sword, they will just clamp their hand around it like this, which is what we call a hammer grip for obvious reasons. And this is a strong grip, and you can generate a lot of power with it. But if you grip too tightly, it's also susceptible to being knocked out of your hands. And it can also limit range of motion in certain actions. So if we look at how Roworth describes the grip, he says to wrap the hand around, and that it's important that the index finger and thumb wrap to provide secure grip. He also tells us that the other fingers should remain loose in many actions for dexterity purposes, and that they should tighten at the point of making contact in terms of attack or defense, so when you're striking or parrying. So that's the basic level. But he also then describes how spadroons and small swords are used, and also potentially how you could use their grip if your sabre is light enough, I would say, as well. But before we get on to that, one important thing that he does mention that you've actually got to look beyond the grip section for and go on to medium guard, which funny enough is the one that he doesn't like, but he just described one extra detail in that for your grip, and he says that the knuckles here should be in line with the knuckle bow. And he says that's absolutely vital in all actions, and it's all to do with getting the edge alignment. So edge alignment is where the edge of the sword is correctly aligned to actually strike the target, so that we don't end up hitting with the flat or even just an angle, that the edge delivers at an angle, which is not going to cut particularly well. So edge alignment is just bringing the edge on to strike the target effectively. And one of the ways he does that is getting these knuckles behind the knuckle bow, so you know where they should be. So don't hold the sword like this, and don't hold the sword like this. It seems obvious, but you know, if you don't know, you might do something different, and it might also twist in the fight, and you really want to avoid that. So make sure the knuckles are in line with the knuckle bow. He calls this the ward iron in Roworth, but in modern terms we tend to call it the knuckle bow. Going back to the grips, so base level, use a hammer grip. Encircle thumb and index finger, and where you grip it on the sword is entirely up to you. Some people like to grip all the way down to the back strap here, and that allows a nice throw, and it also of course gains you a little bit of reach if you've got a grip long enough to gain you, say, an extra inch, which can be nice. Other people grip the center, and other people grip all the way at the top. Now with a stirrup hilted sabre, I would absolutely recommend against doing this, because when the parries, you should be parrying with the force of your blade and not the hilt, but even so, the cuts will often strike and slide down, and they will strike your thumb. The thumb is a real vulnerability with stirrup hilts, and if you don't drop from the hilt a little bit, or possibly even down to the pommel or back strap, then it's really, really exposed. So I would recommend coming at least halfway down the grip, and possibly all the way to the base. Okay. Now, Roworth does to say that with small swords and spadroons, you can grip them with the thumb up the back. Now, when you go to the Victorian period, thumb up the back grip is very common, and that literally means thumb pointing straight up the back of the sword. And that is shown in some illustrations, but also there's another alternative that we will call the handshake grip. And handshake grip is where the thumb is on the side of the grip, not on the back, but it's not clamped onto the index finger. It is resting here on the side. And personally, I feel that handshake grip, and you can even turn it slightly so that the thumb, flat of the thumb, is actually slightly on the grip. Your knuckles are still behind the knuckle bow, and I find this particular grip allows me a great range of movement. And personally, I think when Roworth talks about thumb up the back, I think that's what he's talking about. I think he is talking more on the angle here of the grip, and not literally on the spine of the grip, if you like. And the reason I would give you for that is he says this is the way that's always adopted by small sword and spadroon players. Now with small swords, so this is an antique 18th century small sword, the grip with small sword tends to be essentially a pinch grip like this. So you don't put the finger through the rings like this. This would be a rapier grip where the thumb goes on top of the index finger. those rings are not really big enough. I mean, it can just about squeeze in, but it's not what it's designed for. With the small sword, usually the index finger goes here on the ricasso and the thumb pinches essentially here. And this allows a grip which is, in many ways not so far off a modern pistol grip on a sports fencing weapon. And you can see why that evolved. It's great for getting the point on line and gives you fantastic control. So, and you can see with the pinch grip is you very much end up with the thumb on the ricasso section, whereas if you had a spadroon, there is no ricasso. So yet again, antique spadroon. If you do what I'm now talking about with a handshake, and you put the thumb here, it is pointing up. It's a thumbs up grip, but it's not on the back here. And personally, I think that's the way that he's talking about using spadroons. And I'll also back that up with a bit more evidence, and that is antique spadroons, which I've now got a lot of, and I've handled many, many more. Most of them, I would say, or a fair portion, can't really be comfortably gripped with the thumb completely up. This example is actually pointed and sharp there, so you definitely are not going to be doing that. Whereas if you just, from this thumbs up position, twist just slightly, so that the thumb is here, still pointing up, but it's just come onto the flat of the grip rather than on the back. And then I find you get great edge alignment and great control and no restriction in movement whatsoever. Now, I would suggest that you experiment with this with your sword or a range of different swords and see what you like, because Roworth does say that different grips are suited to different things. He says that the thumbs up grip is not suited to blades that are very heavy or very curved, and also to some basket hilts where they're so limited in the space that you've actually got to fit your hand, which varies. I mean, some basket hilts are huge and have loads of room, and some of them are really compact and you just have to hammer it. So definitely try it with a range of different swords and see what you like, and then consider shifting them during the action. Now, when we talk about grip shifts are literally changing of grip during the fight, and Roworth doesn't describe that. And sometimes I personally do it. I like to change to grip, different grips for different things. Like I might even thumbs up a sabre when I'm going in for some thrusting actions, for example. But that's just me. Roworth doesn't say that. What we have got to go on, though, is Gaspard Le Marchant. Now, Le Marchant revolutionised British swordsmanship just 2 years before the first edition of Roworth, and produced his cavalry manual and worked to develop the 1796 light cavalry sabre, which this is based on. This is an infantry scaled version of that sword. And in his manual, he very usefully has a diagram that shows the grip when in guard and the grip when striking. And what he shows is a hammer grip here when the sword is up in guard, and then this when the cut is actually made. So he's casting it with the thumb on the back. Now, personally, I find that exceptionally useful. I prefer to usually still keep more to handshaking it like this. But either way, whether the thumb is here on the side or whether it's on the top, what it allows you to do is snap a cut in and get a really good straight line from, as straight as it can be with a curved sword, a good straight line from shoulder to tip, whereas if you'd maintained a hammer grip, it's harder and puts a lot more strain through the wrist and the elbow to try and do this. In fact, I went a little bit handshake there. So if I clamp a hammer and do this, it's quite hard to really effectively cut well. And I am showing you cut 7 because it's a good one in terms of angles to show you on the camera. So yeah, I think Le Marchant shows it perfectly, is that from your guard position, hammer's really good. And when you cast, it is actually really good to loosen your grip a little bit and go to what we call handshake. Again, that's not in the manual, but it's a useful term that many of us use today, or thumb on top. So you can see the casting action there. And there's another reason why it's useful to be further down the grip, because as you cast, you're going to need that room for the thumb. If you started all the way up here, you're going to be straight onto the guard and getting hit. So yeah, either in the middle of the grip or drop it down here and grip it. I would say I really like this basic handshake position. And when you throw throw to handshake or throw to thumbs up. And that's my personal preference. Now, do I change my grip depending on which sword I'm using? Yes and no. If you have got a very heavy blade, like an actual light cavalry sabre, then I do find the thumbs up to be awkward and prone to losing your grip. So I don't use it with a really heavy sword. Now, this sabre is an infantry spec one, so it's a lot lighter, and I can personally use it very effectively with the handshake position, so I use it an awful lot. So I tend to even use handshake from a guard position, and I throw to handshake, and I just use it an awful lot. I might come up to thumbs up for certain thrusting actions, and I might return to hammer as I'm making particular parries and snapping at particular targets. So for example, often come into an inside guard, I might stay in, well, I've still gone into handshake there. If at close range, I might actually stay in hammer, which I just have there. Yeah, personally, I would recommend you play with your grip, really experiment with this handshake grip. You will find it gives great dexterity. And remember to loosen these 3 fingers off when you're moving the blade around in certain actions, and even during certain cutting actions. Remember, your cut 3, these need to be supple to be able to pull it off well. And your control then is between index finger and thumb. Okay, so there's a good overview to grips from Roworth and a little bit of info from Gus Butler Marchand. And remember, you can change, you can throw from one to the other. You can go from hammer to thumbs up or handshake. You don't really want to go hammer to hammer except in the certain circumstances, or if the sword requires it because it's restrictive in terms of its basket. And yeah, have an experiment with it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. That is an overview to grips. So, if you haven't subscribed, please do so.